What's up everyone, Phil here for KO Gaming, and welcome to the Hateful Truth Rebooted, where I give you maximum truth and minimum bullshit regarding the latest video game releases. And the subject of today's review is indeed highly controversial, very polarizing. People have been talking about it for the entire past week, and many people have been teetering on the edge of a buy of this game or a skip. I'm here to review it fully and let you know what my full thoughts are on Far Cry Primal. Before we can even review the subject at hand, I have to give you a very brief history lesson. In 2012, Far Cry 3 was released, and it was something unique and different. A really cool open world structure game with tons of melee combat, bullet time first-person shooting, parkour, crafting elements, hunting of animals, and it really did feel like a unique formula. Later next year, Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, a standalone expansion, was released that had the exact same gameplay elements, but instead applied them to a post-apocalyptic 1980s-esque sci-fi plotline with lots of pop culture references. It also was really good. Even though the gameplay was primarily almost the same as Far Cry 3, it was enough different from the original because of the time frame and the pop culture references to warrant kind of a release, and also it wasn't a full retail game, it was a discounted digital release. When Far Cry 4 was released in late 2014, a major complaint of gamers was it was way too similar to Far Cry 3. In fact, the gameplay engine was almost identical with only a few tweaks here or there. Sure, it was a new location and a new villain, but primarily it was more of the same. So now fast forward to 2016 and Far Cry Primal. We actually already know that Far Cry 5 is in development, so a lot of people are very skeptical about why there'd be another Far Cry game being released at this point. And the difference here between Far Cry Primal and Far Cry Blood Dragon is that Blood Dragon was a discounted digital release, while Primal may take this Far Cry game engine and put it into prehistoric times, and therefore remove the gunplay and have some elements that are a lot different than the previous games, but it's being sold for $60. And so the question on everyone's mind is a game that takes the same exact gameplay elements yet again for a fourth time, even though it changes the setting, worth a $60 price tag, and I'm hope to answer that for you right now. First off, let's talk similarities. Yeah, Far Cry Primal is very similar to the previous Far Cry games, starting with Far Cry 3. You've got an open world mission structure. In fact, in this game, more so than the others, you can do things in any particular order that you want. If you want to go after a certain tribe that's at war with yours, if you want to rescue a certain person and have them join your tribe, you could do it in any particular order, which allows a lot of flexibility, but ultimately also creates confusion. You don't really know what's important and what's not. What will you get if you save this person? Should I go after this certain tribe and try to fight their boss right away? Or should I wait and try to do other optional content so that I can upgrade my weapons and armor and abilities before then? It's pretty confusing, and quite honestly, Far Cry Primal does not really give much guidance in regards of what you should be doing at any particular time. All they do is give you a little waypoints on your big mini-map. As you expand it, you can see them a little better, and you realize, I really don't know. Maybe I should just walk in one direction and just do random stuff and see what happens. Should I do this story-based mission? Is it even a story-based mission? The whole thing is very confusing and convoluted, more so than the previous Far Cry games, and in my opinion, that's a major negative. The combat of Primal, although very similar to the previous Far Cry installments, is actually a lot more simple and kind of disappointing. You don't have any guns, so because of that, you're relying totally on melee attacks, which are incredibly simple. Pick up club, swing arm, bash bash. There's no dodge mechanic, there's no block mechanic. You literally just run up and mash the button to take out your opponents. Now there are projectiles. You've got the bow and arrow, which yes, you can upgrade and get better ammo and better bows and basically have it go through armor and stuff later on in the game, and you can try to go for repeated headshots, which I think is actually a little bit easy because they actually give you an auto aim feature. There's also some shards that you can throw, but primarily I never did much damage with them at all. There's also a spear which you can use to jab people, but even the most upgraded spear in the game does almost no damage, so you'll find yourself chucking this thing, trying for instant kills with the spear. It's cool, it's a fun game mechanic, until you realize that even at the very end of the game, you can only carry a certain amount of these things, and you'll find yourself repeatedly shooting arrows and or throwing spears at your opponents, then running back up to their dead bodies to grab those items off the ground again, so you can immediately turn and try to attack the other people who are trying to kill you. It's a tedious game mechanic, it's not very interesting, it's incredibly basic, and you're going to be doing this again and again and again throughout the entire game. Besides the things that I just mentioned, there's very few pieces of the game where there's ever any kind of variety in the combat. Most of the time, you're only using these primary things. Yeah, there's a few other things in regards to, say, a berserk dagger that will make the opponents attack each other, which, by the way, was taken straight out of the previous Far Cry games. But for the most part, it's either bash with the club, shoot with the arrow, throw a spear, wash, rinse, repeat. It's fun for the first couple hours, but once you get tired of it, it becomes incredibly boring, tedious, and repetitive. The crafting and gathering aspect of the game does return from the previous Far Cry games as well. Pretty much everything you see in your environment is something you can harvest, whether it's a rock on the ground, a tree, some kind of plant, and all of these elements can be used to craft various things throughout the game, including more weapons or defense or whatever. Also, there's tons of animals in the game, and a new mechanic in Far Cry Primal is the ability to tame animals and have them become your companion. This is pretty cool, and quite honestly, once you get your first animal companion who's now stopping these animals from attacking you randomly because they jump in front to defend you, or the fact that you can actually command them to go after things you want to hunt, or even command them to go attack a Neanderthal that's coming after you, or even get a stealth kill when someone's not suspecting. It's a pretty cool aspect, and quite honestly, it's probably the one unique aspect of the game that I enjoyed most. But outside of that, it's the same kind of hunting, gathering system that you've seen in the previous Far Cry games. Nothing original is really done here. Yes, you can even craft those same kind of potions from Far Cry 3 that gave you abilities are present in this game as well. Again, it's the same game engine lifted out of those and put into a prehistoric setting. So over the course of the game, you will find certain unique NPCs which you can rescue during certain missions. If you do, they will come back to your camp and actually become a part of the populace of your group. And they will actually create tents and or places to live in your camp, and you can decide whether or not you want to do unique side questing structures based off of what the character's abilities are, such as maybe gathering a certain element so that they can craft something for you, or maybe going on a wild animal hunt because they're a master hunter. In turn, when you do these missions, you usually will learn something, like how to craft a new unique item for yourself, or maybe learn a new kind of combat mechanic or hunting mechanic that is going to improve your character and help you out in the course of the game. Ultimately, once all the quests are completed, you have to ask yourself, well, what's left? So once you've gotten everyone, recruited them, gotten them back to your camp, done all of their side mission structures, there's two things left to do. Either upgrade your camp to the highest level, or go out and kill the two tribal leaders who are in competition with you. Now, I'm not the kind of person who wants to go out and endlessly spend time collecting different elements and hunting for animal skins so that I can upgrade my base camp. The bottom line is these people are Neanderthals. They don't need giant mansions to live in. So once I got everyone, recruited them to my camp, and did their side missions, I decided to head out and head after the two rival tribes who were trying to take over the area in the game. One of them, called the Udam, or a more melee-based class. They're very strong, they have armor, they're pretty tough, and, it's kind of interesting trying to sack their camp. There's actually two different major missions in each area for you to do. There's a fortress takeover, by which you're going to try to storm a fortress, kill off all minions, face a boss-level character who's pretty tough and has high HP. Once they're defeated, you've officially taken over their camp, and that boss-level character will actually join your tribe, leading to another new side-questing mission. Now, you can also just head straight for the chieftain. This is probably not recommended early on because without high-level upgrades and combat abilities and weapons, it's going to be very tough because you will be facing waves and waves of enemies, and there's a big boss fight at the end of each of these camps that's incredibly cheap. And what I mean by that is that these bosses are tanks. You will hit them with dozens and dozens of arrows and spears, and they will not go down. They will barely lose any health. Now, in one case, one boss actually had a unique element where if you hit stalactites or stalagmites, whatever they're called, off the ceiling and landed on his head, he would get stunned, and then you could do a takedown attack that did a significant amount of damage. So it was almost like a multi-step boss fight that you had to figure out. In the case of the other boss fight, I don't know what this game expected you to do. This girl would never come down from this ledge. She was just shooting arrows, and by the way, she had super keen eagle eyesight, never missed a shot, her arrows were on fire, and if she ever hit you with an arrow, you were left with almost no health. So you had to constantly be going behind cover, try to sneak in an arrow shot here or there, run around the area, gather different elements so you could craft more arrows so you could keep shooting her. The fight is incredibly tedious, incredibly annoying, and then, by the way, she summons waves and waves of repetitive minions. Finally, she does come down from her perch, but guess what? Now, she's invincible. That's right. Until you kill all of the minions in the area, even if she goes to 0 HP in her life bar, she refuses to die. So it's really an annoying, tedious game mechanic. Should not be in the game in 2016. This actually happens multiple times during this game where you're trying to take one of these camps, but there's a boss level character. You're trying to kill them. They refuse to die. Then you realize, oh, I have to kill all the minions around them first, then I'll be able to finish off the boss. It's really stupid, it's bad game programming, and it doesn't belong in a retail release from a modern era. So now we head into my major gripe with the game. The ending, or lack of one. Allow me to explain. When I was playing Far Cry Primal, I went out and did things in whatever order I wanted. I got a unique companion Sabretooth, and I rescued everyone out there and recruited them to my camp, and I did all of their side mission upgrades. Then I decided to go after the tribes. It's actually interesting because, as I mentioned, when you take over certain tribal camps, some people from their tribes join you. Then I did their side mission structures. Eventually I went after the tribal bosses, and after you kill each tribal boss, you will get a cutscene, which is nice. Once you reach certain kind of milestones in the story, you'll get a cutscene. And then ultimately, the game just left me wandering the open world, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do next. No credits ever played, nothing. And I was completely confused. What am I supposed to be doing in this game? And I did every story-based mission on the map besides upgrading everyone's hut to the max level, to the point where I said, if that's really what this game wants me to do, after playing it almost 17 hours, you want me to drop everything to spend another 3 to 4 repetitive hours grabbing these collection items? Screw you. And I walked away from the game, because there was nothing else left of interest to do. Come to find out, I did complete the game. What I did in the game, all the story-based stuff, was supposed to trigger the credits and an actual hidden cutscene after the credits. Apparently, my game bugged out. But this lends the question, why is the game so open-structured that you could get so lost and not know you're doing anything that's story-based and even know when the ending's supposed to come? It's a huge and critical design flaw. There is a thing known as being too open world, and unfortunately, that's what Far Cry Primal suffers from. You don't know where you're supposed to be going, what you're supposed to be doing, and I understand maybe why they did it. They wanted you to get immersed and wander around and not really care about what you're completing and complete it at your own pace. But without any kind of guidance to know what you were supposed to do to hit the criteria to end the game, you literally end up sitting there with your thumb up your butt saying, what comes next? I don't know. So I never saw the ending of Far Cry Primal. I never will see the ending of Far Cry Primal because apparently my game was glitched. A critical design flaw that's really annoying. Boy, am I glad I didn't spend several hours crafting these huts in my village just to find out I was supposed to see the ending anyway. That's a major detriment and a major problem with the game. So let's talk positives and negatives about Primal. Positives. First off, the graphics are great. Tons of different environmental locations that vary between, say, plains to jungles to the Great White North to almost more arid areas. Really enjoyed that. Like the fact that even though you're going through this one open world, that it kind of changes depending on where you are. And definitely the look and design of the animals in the game look very realistic, very awesome and lifelike. Definitely enjoyed that. And even the look of the human characters. You could tell they did research and tried to make the certain clans and certain tribes look different, almost kind of looking like different groups of Neanderthals from, you know, the prehistoric times, and I really enjoyed that attention to detail. I also like the new ability to not only hunt, but take control of different animals. To have an animal companion that you can control and sick on something, or have a defensive kind of capability so you're not constantly getting jumped by the animals in the wild, was a definite plus, and it made a game that normally obviously would be single player feel more like a cooperative experience, and that was a cool addition that I definitely enjoyed. I also feel that the Far Cry engine fits Primal better than the other Far Cry games in this line. Let's face it, back then in prehistoric times, there was no drugstore where you could go to buy drugs or healing items. There was nowhere where you could go buy ammo. You had to craft everything for yourself. So wandering around an open world, grabbing all these elements and making things with your own hands kind of made sense. I'll be honest, in the previous Far Cry games, it was really confusing. Yes, I'm grabbing these herbs and smashing them into bullets to make special ammo and making my own kind of treatment. Sure you are. It was just kind of a silly element, and you say, well, it's a video game, I suspend my disbelief. In Primal, it almost seems like it's viable that back then, that's what they did. So in all honesty, I do think that this game engine makes sense in this setting. But now let's talk negatives. Oh boy. Number one. It's basically the same game as the previous Far Cries. There's almost nothing original and new added to it. You do the same parkour, the same kind of combat. In fact, it's even more dumbed down in Primal than it has been in previous Far Cry games, and there's very few moments where you're like, wow, this feels like kind of a first thing I'm ever doing. It really does feel like they just took the engine, slapped it into a new game, and sold it for $60 to try to make a quick buck, and that kind of sucks. Number two, lack of a structured narrative. In a lot of games, an open world, do it at your own pace and in your own order kind of an idea works. In Far Cry Primal, it does not. In fact, it falls flat on its face. You never actually feel while playing the game that you think you're doing the right thing or that you're actually working towards an end goal. You don't even know what your end goal is. And ultimately, I could see people just getting confused and or lost in this game and just putting it down and never getting back to it because you don't have an end destination. When you're on a journey, you want to know what your end goal is, and if you don't know, what's the purpose of even taking the journey? That's the problem with Far Cry Primal. They just throw you in, you're expected to just do things on the map because they're there, you don't know why the hell you're doing them 95% of the time, and it just becomes a convoluted mess. Of course, I've got to call out the archaic game design. When you get near the end of this game, the final 20%, when you're trying to take over these final bosses and their settlements, and you find that you cannot kill the boss until all the minions around them are dead, I just don't understand this design choice. It's something that you would do in like the 1980s to extend the length of a game that maybe they thought was too easy or, you know, wasn't very long, so they had to up the challenge. This is something that should not ever be done in modern times. It's a cop-out. It's the definition of artificial difficulty. If I deplete the boss's energy bar, the final hit should kill the fucking boss. Period. I don't ever want to see this in another game again, and it frustrated the living shit out of me. And of course, we do have to call out the fact that I didn't actually get the ending of the game, despite completing all of the criteria that were required to see it. Unfortunately, it seems this game does have bugs within its open world mission structure, and that's a major negative that needs to be called out in this review. Ultimately, you will get anywhere from 15 to possibly 30 or more gameplay hours out of Far Cry Primal. So I certainly can't shame this game or hurt it for saying that it's too short or it's a shameless cash-in. But what I can tell you is this: the amount of enjoyment you're going to get out of this game is directly representative to how much you've liked the gameplay of those past 3 Far Cry games, especially if you've already played them. I'll be honest, I probably once again will say I would have liked Far Cry Primal better if it were the first Far Cry game I'd ever played. But I'd already played 4, and I'd already played Blood Dragon, and I'd already played 3. So when you've played the same game, and in fact in some cases better versions of this game in the past, it's hard for me to say you gotta play it. I would even be hard-pressed to say it's a rental, because why do you want to play the same game again with almost no new elements and this open-world confusing structure? I didn't like that aspect of it. I think they should have done more in the originality. Maybe there should have been some really cool epic fights put in there for story-based purposes, and there's almost none of that. It's just do the gameplay, do the gameplay, do the gameplay, and get hooked on the gameplay, and I just didn't get hooked on it this 4th time around. So if you liked the previous games and you want more of the same, you'll probably like Far Cry Primal. If you never played a Far Cry game before, maybe you'll like Far Cry Primal. But if you've either played any of the previous games, I don't know if I can even recommend this one. So weighing and balancing everything against all the games I've played recently and everything, and the fact there's bugs in the game and it's tedious, and I have to be honest, I'm going to give Far Cry Primal a 7 out of 10. I cannot say this is a bad game, because really it's not bad. It's just tedious, annoying, and just too much more of the same if you've played the previous games. I can't say it's game of the year because there's really nothing original about it, but I certainly can't talk shit and say it's not a functional game because for the most part, it is, despite a few really archaic design choices. So, I give it a 7 out of 10. Be with that as it will, whatever you think. If you want to check it out or not based off of this review, good luck, but I certainly cannot recommend this game because I just thought it was more the same. That is it for the Hateful Truth Rebooted. I hope that you liked it, everyone, and if you did, please check the video description for a link over to my raw playthrough of Far Cry Primal, which can be found on my gaming channel, DSP Gaming. In addition, please check out our Amazon Associates link, as well as my Patreon at patreon.com/DarksidePhil. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time on the Hateful Truth.